Hey, this is Sam Christoff. In the last two videos, I showed you how to set up Unity 3D and Visual Studio Code. And in this video, I'll show you how to make them work together. So I'll start by launching Unity. I have a shortcut on my desktop, so I'll just double click that. And it brings me to the kind of lobby menu here. And in the upper right, I can click New to create a new Unity project. And this will just be a dummy project to integrate Visual Studio Code and Unity together. So I'm going to click New, and I have to provide a project name. So I'll just call it Unity VS Code. You pick 2D or 3D depending on if you want to develop a 2D or 3D game. That doesn't matter for this, either one is fine. It's going to default to your documents folder. That's fine for this project. Later on, I'll show you how to set up GitHub and how you should do source control and things like that. For now, we'll just dump it in documents, and organization will be whichever user you're logged in as. So all of that looks good. I will hit Create Project, and it will create my new project and bring me to the main Unity window. We'll go over some more of this later, but for now, the first thing we need to do is tell Unity that whenever we're editing code, we want it to use Visual Studio Code as our editor. So to do that, we can go to Edit and Preferences. And this is where we set preferences for the entire project. And there's an External Tools section. If I click that, you can see we have a few options here under External Script Editor. MonoDevelop is the editor that's included with Unity 3D. You can see I also have Visual Studio 2017 Community and 2015 on my system, and then you can browse for others. But we want to go a little bit farther than just browsing for VS Code. So let's go ahead and close that. And then in the top center of the screen, you should see the Asset Store. So we're actually going to grab an asset from the Asset Store that makes the VS Code integration easier. In the Asset Store, I'll search on the top for VS Code. And we better make it one word. VS Code. All right, so VS Code, one word, no space. And you can see the first one is the VS Code editor extension. I'm gonna click that. And that will take me to the Asset Store page for it. You can see it's a free download. So I'll just click download to install that. And it's going to add these assets to my project. So you can see here everything that's going to add, how-to PDF, license, and it's going to create this plugin folder. So this vscode.cs is a C# script that is going to handle some of this integration for me. So I will hit all of them that are checked, and that's good. So I'll hit import, and it will install and build that. And now you see it added a folder here. So under my assets folder, it created a VS Code folder and a plugin folder and editor folder. So after that is in here, now I should be able to say edit and choose preferences and external tools. And now I'll choose browse and browse to Visual Studio Code. So it may install to a different location depending on your system, but for me it's in C:, program files, and I believe Microsoft VS Code right here. And the main program is called Code.exe. So I'll select that by double clicking it. And now you can see my default editor is Visual Studio Code. So now I can close the preferences, and rather than the Asset Store, I'm going to click back to see my scene view. And what I'm going to do here now is to test this integration under Assets, I'm going to right click on that folder and say Create a Folder, and I'll call that Scripts. That's where I'm going to put all my scripts. Double click to go in there, right click, and create a C# script. You can write your code for Unity in C# or JavaScript. At the end of the day, either one is fine. I like C#. I prefer C# because it's a bit more robust. So that's what we're going to be using for all of our examples. So I'll click C# script, and I'll give it a name. I'll just call it main. And now we have a C# script. I'll double click on that and it will launch in my default editor. So you see here it comes up in Visual Studio Code. And you can see Visual Studio Code is connecting to Unity. It's downloading some packages since this is the first time. It's going to be building C# code. It's going to download all of the OmniSharp and the .NET Core debugger and things like that. It should just take a second, and now it's set up and ready to go. So you can see here I have my main C# script, and in the start function, let's just do a debug.log, and you can see as I type this, so we want to print something out to the console, so we're going to say debug.log, and because we installed the C# extensions for VS Code, as I start to type debug, you can see that IntelliSense will complete it for me. So you can start typing, you just hit enter to pick that, or use your mouse and click on it. The idea is to just help you write code faster. So say debug, and when I type dot, now again you can see all the options for the functions I can call on the debug class or other properties that it has. We want to print to the screen, so we're going to say debug.log with a capital L, and then parentheses and quote. So we're going to pass it a string. We just want it to print something out. Say hello world with an exclamation mark. And you can see here now there's a red squiggly, like I misspelled something. If I hover over it, it says it expected a semicolon, so we're going to end the line with a semicolon. So anytime you see a red squiggly, that means that there's something wrong at that point. You'll also notice over on the right side of the window here, in the scroll bar area, there's a red mark to show that there's something wrong at that location. So if I come up here and I put my semicolon, you can see that the red squiggly went away, red mark in my scroll bar went away. So that's just a quick way to check and see if there are any errors in your code. You'll also notice that now that I've made changes to this file, the main tab up here, the X has changed to a circle. That's called a dirty dot. That indicates that the file has changed and I haven't saved those changes. So I'll hit Control S to save my changes, and now everything is saved and ready to go. Now we'll jump back into Unity and actually run this script. So right now the script is not attached to anything. It's not going to run when we run our game. We need to attach it to a component in a scene so that it actually runs and we can test it out. So to do that, we can see right here I have an untitled scene that Unity added by default. It has a main camera and a directional light, and we'll get into those more later, but for now we just need to attach the script to one of them so that it runs when that object comes into existence. So I'm going to click on the main.cs file and just click and drag it up to my main camera. You can see when I hover over main camera, let go of it, looks like nothing happened, but if I click main camera, we can see in the inspector tab on the right, all the way at the bottom, you can see the script is attached now, main.script, and that is now attached to my camera. So now if I go to the top and I click the play button to run my project, it's going to build, it's going to run, and if I look back on the bottom now in the console, you can see that hello world was printed out. So when the game started, it loaded the main camera, loaded the light. When the camera comes into existence, it starts executing that script, and one of the things that it executes first is this start function. So that executes when the camera comes into existence, and it prints hello world to the console, which we can see right here. Now the last thing we're going to do is just make sure that we have everything set up to debug our project as well. So if we jump back to Visual Studio Code, we'd say debug and start debugging, and it's going to ask us to select the environment, and we want to use the Unity debugger. And this is going to connect Visual Studio Code to Unity while they're running and keep them in sync. So I'll click Unity debugger, and it's going to create a default launch.json. This just describes what you want it to do when you actually launch. So that looks fine. I'm just going to close that. You'll notice it's saved in my project over here. And now I can hover over a line. So let's say our debug print hello world, line 9. I'll click just to the left of the line number. You see a red dot. That's a breakpoint. So that means when code gets to this point, it's going to stop executing and wait for me to make a decision. So I will click and add a breakpoint there. And now when I say debug, start debugging, the code is going to launch. It's going to launch in the Unity editor. So if I jump over here and launch this, we can see that the game started, but it's kind of stopped. It's not doing anything. It didn't completely load. And the reason for that is because you can see Visual Studio Code's flashing here at the bottom. If we jump to Visual Studio Code, you'll see that the scene came into existence, the camera came into existence, which loaded my script here, and it hit the breakpoint, so it stops. And now I can go examine variables, or do whatever sort of debugging I need to do. I could step through code, whatever I need to do. So it stopped here, so that's great. It makes it shows that Visual Studio Code and Unity are working in sync. At the top, you can see now I have some debugging tools. I can abort, I can restart the execution, or I can say go ahead and finish executing. So I'll hit that, and Visual Studio will continue executing. If I jump back to Unity, now you can see I'm in play mode, and the console outputted hello world again. And that's all there is to it. Unity is set up to work with Visual Studio Code, and we're ready to start working on our video game. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to post below, and let me know if you have ideas for other game development videos you'd like to see. Thanks.